All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome officially to Wednesday. Um, two very quick things before we get started, and then I have some video I'd like to show you. Um, First of all, do you know we have a day off tomorrow? Yes.
Yes.
Do you know why?
Because of the faculty.
Yes. Do you know what that means? You don't know.
I know it's holiday.
It's a holiday. What it is, let me explain it to you because it's worth knowing why. So, in a nutshell, here in Canada, Indigenous people were here first, right? Their ancestors came here about 12 to 15,000 years ago, and until about 1500 AD, they were the only people here, right? So all of North America and South America had all kinds of indigenous cultures, different languages, different ways of living, most of them hunter-gatherers, which I know Kenny is a big fan of. And again, they kind of lived here in sort of peace and harmony, more or less, for thousands of years until the arrival of Europeans. And so once Columbus discovered the New World in 1492, increasing waves of explorers and traders and colonists and things started to come to North America. And as they did, they pushed aside indigenous people. In the process, their cultures were kind of destroyed. Many of them died from disease or from other causes. And now, as we kind of, as we are the country of Canada today, Indigenous people have kind of been pushed to the side, right? And Canada is not really an Indigenous country; it's a colonial country, right? So this place was colonized, but unlike some other places in the world, like India or some countries in Africa, the colonizers didn't really leave, right? They kind of stayed here and made a country. And so what kind of brought this whole thing to the forefront was the idea of Indian residential schools. So as part of this attempt to push Indigenous people aside to create the country you see before you, Indigenous kids were required to go to Indian residential schools, and they were boarding schools. And they were supposed to be educated, but really what was happening was, you remember how we talked about enculturation, the process of learning your culture? Really what these schools were designed to do was the opposite of that process. So I don't know, de-enculturation, I don't know, that's not a word, but that's kind of what their job was, is to try to strip these kids of their indigenous culture and kind of make them European, if you will. And in the process, these kids suffered an immense amount of emotional and physical and sexual abuse. Many of these kids didn't make it home. And we kind of knew about that, but it pushed its way to the forefront when outside of the old Indian residential school in Kamloops, BC, so the Indian residential schools have all been closed for 25 years now or so. The last one closed 20 or 25 years ago. So they did sort of a ground scan. They used ground penetrating radar. And what they found was about 200 unmarked graves. And these 200 graves are from kids who went to the school and died there and were simply effectively buried in the backyard and forgotten about. And since that discovery, other Indigenous groups have been doing some scanning of the land around other Indian residential schools. And unfortunately, but not surprisingly, they're finding more graves. And so once the totals are kind of added up, I'm sure we're going to be talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids that died at these schools. And so again, keep in mind the correct number of students dying at school is 0, right? That's the number of kids that should die at school is 0. And so, in addition to all the other bad things that indigenous people have been subjected to, this one really kind of drives home what's happened here in Canada. And again, it's an ugly chapter of Canadian history, right? That's not who we market ourselves to be, right? We've marketed ourselves to be really nice and inclusive and multicultural and tolerant and all that stuff. And, to some degree that's very true, right? But our history also has some very ugly chapters, and the effects of those chapters continue today. So what tomorrow is about, and what all of this orange is about, and the Every Child Matters thing that you see everywhere, what that is about is a chance for people to kind of stop and think about what's happened here in Canada, and think about how we are going to mend that relationship between Indigenous Canadians and non-Indigenous Canadians. Okay, and it's something we may have some time for a little bit later. I will spend some time talking about BC First Nations culture. I also may have a field trip for you later in the term, but I'll talk about that more once I've arranged everything. What tomorrow is for is to kind of consider what we need to do to kind of move forward and sort of heal that relationship and sort of return to some measure of equality between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians. And I know for the most part, all of you basically just got here. You're not Canadian citizens, you're students studying here. But, unfortunately for you, you're a part of this now, right? Yes, you are. Because you benefit from the fact that Indigenous people have been pushed aside, right? The same way that I do. And so we all kind of need to think about what needs to be done to sort of heal that relationship and rectify the awful things that have been done in the past. And again, it's not an easy thing. I don't know how to do it. I don't know what it means. I don't know, when we get there, when we have healed the relationship, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know that anyone knows. But the day tomorrow and the orange and all of that stuff, I think it's a step in the right direction, right? It allows people to think about it and talk about it, and hopefully, that moves us forward. Because it's been a long few hundred years for Indigenous people, and they would like to sort of have this settled, as much, more than we would, right? But we need to kind of move forward, and the day is part of that. Okay, so that's not a great summary. It's very short. There's a lot of detail that was left out, but that's kind of what tomorrow is about. So now you know. So while you're enjoying your day and sleeping in and hanging out with your friends or just doing whatever you do tomorrow, spare a few minutes thought for what's going on here and what's happened to Indigenous people, because we live a pretty good life here in Canada, I think, and in part that's because some people were pushed aside and thrown out to make room for that. Anyway, that's my thing. The other thing I'll mention very quickly is we have a Terry Fox run to go on today. We don't have to run, but we will go for a walk at 11. So it's 2.61 kilometers. So we'll just go down that way. We'll walk along the seawall a little bit and we'll come back. It'll be some nice fresh air, nice exercise. It'll be nice to get out of the classroom. The weather's not perfect, but it's not raining right now, so I think we should take advantage of.
Is it mandatory?
It's not mandatory, but it's very strongly recommended. Very strongly. It's okay if you. No, come on. Yeah, come on, Felicia. Yeah, we're all gonna go. It's gonna be nice. We're gonna stretch our legs. We're gonna get fresh air. It's gonna be good. What? Say again? What? Is it for the rain? What about the rain? Oh, for the grade? Do you want me to make it for a grade?
Yeah.
How about I'll fail you if you don't go?
Then I'll go.
Does that work?
Yeah, it's gonna be.
Okay, if you don't go, if you don't know. Good grief, you guys. We are going. End of story. Okay, let's jump into where we were yesterday because there is some things I want to finish up before we go on our little walk. We've only got 40 minutes. Yesterday we talked about Gilgamesh, right? The Epic of Gilgamesh, and the idea that he was a myth, right? His story was a myth that's passed down from generation to generation. It's a fantastic story with gods and monsters and superhuman strength. And it does contain some lessons for us to learn, but also for the Sumerians to learn, right? And again, maybe the Sumerians saw the value of persistence, right? So Gilgamesh doesn't really give up, right? He persists trying to achieve his goal, but sometimes he fails, right? He tries to achieve, but he fails. He's brave, right? He's courageous. He goes out into the wilderness, faces off against dangerous creatures, enters the underworld. I'm not sure how much I want to enter the underworld. Probably not. I think I'd rather stay up here. He's a brave guy, but in the end, he's also redeemed, right? He was a crappy king at the beginning of the story. He was an a-hole, right? For lack of a better term. But at the end of the story, he's become kind of a better man, a better king, right? What else can we learn? Well, we know some things about their beliefs, right? We encounter multiple gods, and so we know that they're polytheistic. And we also see in this story the need to respect the gods, because if you don't, punishment will follow, right? And we see that with Enkidu. He slaps Ishtar with, I don't know, a hunk of the bull of heaven or whatever it was. He disrespects her and pays the price, right? And again, maybe we can learn a little bit about heroism, right? And I think lots of stories, even in modern day, try to sort of tell us what it means to be a hero, right? What it means to be a good person. And maybe from this story we see that, yeah, he's a hero because of his humanity, right? Yes, he's stronger than other humans. Yes, he lives longer than other humans. He's capable of doing things that regular mortals are not capable of. But it's not really that makes him a hero, right? It's his humanity that makes him sort of a hero, right? And again, we talked a little bit about, yesterday we talked about the storytelling animal. I'm just going to jump through really quick. And I also introduced you to this idea of the hero's journey, right? Joseph Campbell's idea that many of these kind of stories that exist in various cultures' myth have a hero or somebody going out on a quest, right? Looking for something, right? And then coming back at the end having either achieved or failed, having gained the prize or some knowledge or perspective or whatever it is. And it is interesting whether all hero stories fit this template or not. It's interesting how many stories actually do, right? And not on purpose, right? Almost by coincidence, they seem to work the same way, right? So if he's right, if Campbell is right, there's something going on here, right? There's something about humanity or human experience that is reflected in this structure, right? Whatever it is, whether it's kind of a metaphor for our lives or whether it, suits our need to kind of put our experiences into some sort of story, into some sort of narrative, like Jonathan Gottschall says. I don't know, right? Maybe it's just the way our brain works, but there seems to be something about this type of story that is meaningful to humans for whatever reason, right? Which, again, I think just in itself is very interesting. Good. Okay. So I have some video to show you here, and the video should take us right to right to the walk time. So I've got some questions here that I want to ask. I'm going to put them into Microsoft Teams in just a minute. But you can see I'm asking about how Sumerians kind of imagine the world, how they use their natural resources. We might know the answer to that already. Their number system has a base of 60, which is very interesting. You'll see that. Arnold Toynbee has an idea about stimulus and response that I'd like to talk with you about. That we'll hear a little bit about technological developments, a mythological explanation for the invention of writing, and then maybe the first thing to be mass produced in the history of the world. We'll hear about all those things, okay? So for online people, you'll see that in Microsoft Teams, the link is there, but I'm going to post it again just so that you have it. And here in class, of course, we're going to watch the section of the film here that's from 30 minutes and 6 seconds to 55 minutes, okay? So that's posted in Microsoft Teams. Also for people in class watching, you can keep track of the questions in Microsoft Teams. But let's jump in, let's watch it, and see what we learn, okay? So online people, I'll see you in just a little bit. Enjoy this part of the documentary, and we'll see you closer to 11. So, all right, people, we've only got about 5 minutes before our walk. So here's what we'll do. If you want to run to the bathroom, go do it. Or if you want to grab your coat or your umbrella, as I say, doesn't seem to be raining right now, so we should be okay. We'll meet back just in front of the stairs here in just a few minutes. If you want to leave stuff in this room, you can, because I'm going to lock the door when we leave. So if you want to leave your stuff here, that's okay. If you don't want to leave your stuff here, then that's fine too. Online people, I'm going to bid you adieu because we're going to go for a walk. So you can too if you so desire. But other than that, tomorrow's a day off, so we'll see you Friday and we'll review this, okay? So sorry to cut you loose so quickly. It's a bit of a rush day here. But yeah, online people, we'll see you Friday, okay? So have a good day off and au revoir.